Something about its solitude makes it more tempting than when the jar was full. You see, human nature has a peculiar way of assigning value to things that are just out of reach. But today, we're going to talk about something deeper than cats and cookies. We're going to explore a truth so fundamental that it will transform how you view yourself and your relationships with others. The truth is this: your presence has value. But most of you, yes, you're sitting right there, are giving it away for free. You're like a premium product being sold at a discount store. And do you know what happens to premium products at discount stores? They lose their prestige, their appeal, and ultimately their value. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you said no to an invitation, not because you were busy, but because you needed time for yourself? When was the last time you held back from responding immediately to every message, every call, every demand on your time? If you're struggling to remember, you're not alone. But you're also not doing yourself any favors. You see, in this world of instant gratification, where everything is available at the tap of a screen, we've forgotten the power of absence. We've forgotten that diamonds are valuable, not just because they're beautiful, but because they're rare. We've forgotten that the sun's warmth feels more precious after a long winter. We've forgotten that hunger makes the feast taste better. But here's what really keeps me up at night watching brilliant, capable, extraordinary individuals diminish their light because they're afraid of being seen as difficult or unavailable. They say yes when their soul screams no. They show up everywhere for everyone until their presence becomes as common as air, necessary but unnoticed. Think about the people you value most in your life. Are they the ones who are always available, always saying yes, always there at your beck and call? Or are they the ones whose time feels like a gift, whose presence feels like an honor, whose attention makes you sit up straighter and listen more carefully? You're thinking about someone right now, aren't you? Someone whose approval means more because they don't give it easily. Someone whose time feels valuable because they don't give it freely. Someone whose opinion carries weight because they don't share it carelessly. Now, let me be clear, this isn't about playing games or manipulating people. This is about understanding a fundamental law of human nature and using it to honor your own worth. This is about recognizing that your time, your energy, your presence, they are precious resources. And like any resource, their value is determined by their scarcity. But there's a cost to being everywhere, to being everything to everyone. Each time you say yes when you want to say no. Each time you make yourself available when you need solitude. Each time you give your energy to something that doesn't serve your purpose, you're making a withdrawal from your own value. I've seen it happen countless times. A talented professional who never turns down a project becomes the office doormat. A kind friend who never says no becomes the group's emotional dumping ground. A loving partner who's always available becomes taken for granted. These aren't just stories, they're cautionary tales about what happens when we forget our own worth. But here's what fascinates me even more. The moment someone who's always available becomes scarce, people start to notice. When the always ready colleague starts setting boundaries, people begin to respect their time. When the ever-present friend starts prioritizing self-care, people begin to value their presence. When the constantly available partner starts pursuing their own interests, the relationship often deepens. You might be thinking, but what if people forget about me? What if they replace me? What if they don't need me anymore? These are valid fears, but they stem from a scarcity mindset. The truth is, when you're living in alignment with your worth, the right people don't forget you, they respect you more. They don't replace you, they value you more. They don't stop needing you, they start appreciating you more. Consider the moon. It doesn't show its full face every night, yet we don't love it any less. In fact, its phases make it more intriguing, more worthy of our attention. Its absence makes its presence more spectacular. Nature understands this principle perfectly. Seasons come and go, tides ebb and flow. And in this rhythm there is power. But let me share something that might surprise you. This principle of value through selective presence isn't just about personal relationships. It applies to every area of your life. Your ideas carry more weight when you speak less but more meaningfully. Your work receives more recognition when you take on fewer projects but execute them exceptionally. Your contributions make a bigger impact when they're thoughtful rather than constant. Think about the last time you were truly missed. Not just noticed to be absent, but genuinely missed. What created that feeling in others? It wasn't just your absence, it was the quality of your presence when you were there. It was the value you brought that couldn't be easily replaced. It was the unique way you made others feel that couldn't be replicated. This is where many people misunderstand the concept of being missed. They think it's about creating artificial scarcity, about playing hard to get. But that's not it at all. Being missed is about being valuable when you are present and being secure enough in that value to step away when you need to. Let me tell you something that might shock you. Being indispensable is a trap. Yes, you heard me right. That thing you've been striving for, that position of being so essential that nothing can function without you, it's a cage wrapped in gold. Because when you become indispensable in the wrong way, you become imprisoned by your own necessity. You see, there's a profound difference between being valued and being needed. Being needed often comes from creating dependencies, making yourself the solution to every problem, the answer to every question, the go-to person for every crisis. But being valued, that comes from creating impact, delivering excellence when you choose to engage, bringing transformation when you choose to contribute, creating meaningful change when you choose to act. Think about water for a moment. In most developed countries, it's available at the turn of a tap, day or night. It's essential, yes, but do we marvel at it? Do we celebrate each drop? Now think about rain in a drop. Every droplet becomes precious, celebrated, appreciated. Same water, different value, all because of its availability. This isn't about becoming unreliable or uncommitted. Far from it. This is about becoming intentional with your energy, selective with your time, and strategic with your presence. It's about understanding that your value isn't measured by how many hours you put in, how many tasks you complete, or how many people you please. Your value is measured by the impact you create, the transformation you bring, and the excellence you deliver. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment you start treating your presence as valuable, something magical happens. The energy you bring to any situation changes. When you're not everywhere, trying to be everything to everyone, you can be fully present where you choose to be. And that full presence, that focus, intentional, purposeful presence is magnetic. I've watched people transform their entire lives by understanding this principle. There was a community leader who was burning out from being available 24/7. The moment she set office hours and stuck to them, not only did her well-being improve, but her community began to organize itself better. They became more self-reliant, more resourceful, and paradoxically, they respected her leadership even more. This is the beautiful irony. When you stop trying to be indispensable, you become more valuable. When you stop being available all the time, people start to appreciate the time you do give. When you stop trying to be everywhere, your presence becomes more meaningful wherever you choose to be. But let's talk about the fear that's probably creeping up right now. That voice in your head saying, if I'm not always available, people will stop needing me. If I'm not always helping, they'll find someone else. If I'm not always there, I'll lose my place. I hear you. These fears are real, but they're based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. People don't value what's easily obtained. They don't treasure what's always available. They don't appreciate what's freely given without limits or boundaries. This isn't because people are ungrateful. It's because we're wired to pursue what's valuable, and value is often perceived through the lens of scarcity. Think about your own experiences. When someone who rarely gives compliments praises your work, doesn't it mean more? When someone who guards their time makes space for you, doesn't it feel special? When someone who's selective with their commitments chooses to support your project, doesn't it feel more significant? This is the essence of increasing your value. It's not about becoming less committed, less caring, or less available. It's about becoming more intentional, more purposeful, and more impactful. It's about shifting from quantity to quality, from constant presence to meaningful presence, from being needed to being valued. But here's the part that many people miss. Increasing your value isn't just about what you withhold. It's about what you deliver when you do engage. If you're going to be selective with your time and energy, then what you bring to the table when you show up needs to be exceptional. This means being fully present, bringing your best self, and delivering value that justifies your selective availability. You need to become like a master chef who opens their restaurant only a few nights a week but serves experiences that people talk about for months. Like an artist who releases work rarely but creates pieces that move people to tears. Like a speaker who selects few engagements but delivers messages that transform lives. This requires a fundamental shift in how you view yourself and your contributions. Stop seeing yourself as a resource to be consumed and start seeing yourself as an investment to be valued. Stop being the always available convenience store and start being the exclusive boutique. Stop being the background music everyone tunes out and start being the concert people plan their lives around. But remember, this isn't about ego or arrogance. It's about honoring your worth and respecting your own boundaries. It's about understanding that your time, energy, and presence are precious resources that should be invested wisely, not spent carelessly. When you start living this way, something remarkable happens. The quality of your relationships improves because they're based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Your work becomes more impactful because it's focused rather than scattered. Your personal growth accelerates because you have the space and energy to invest in yourself. This is what it means to let them miss you not as a manipulation tactic, but as a natural consequence of living in alignment with your worth. When you show up with purpose, engage with intention, and deliver with excellence, your absence becomes notable not because you're playing games, but because your presence is truly valuable. The world is full of people trying to prove their worth through constant availability, endless giving, and an unlimited access. But true value isn't created through abundance, it's created through impact. And impact requires space, intention, and the courage to be missed sometimes. There's a question that's been burning in my spirit, and I need to ask it. When was the last time you felt truly irreplaceable? Not because you were doing everything, but because what you did mattered so deeply that it left an imprint. If you're struggling to remember, we need to talk about something that most people get completely wrong, the difference between being busy and being valuable. You see, in our hyper-connected world, we've fallen into a dangerous trap. We've started equating accessibility with importance, availability with value. We walk around with devices that make us reachable at every moment. And somehow we've convinced ourselves that being constantly available makes us more valuable. But let me tell you something powerful. No one ever became extraordinary by being ordinary, and nothing became precious by being common. The truth that's going to set many of you free today is this: your value isn't determined by your availability, it's determined by your impact. And impact requires space. It requires room to think, to create, to innovate, to become. But most importantly, it requires the courage to be missed. Let me share something that might change your perspective forever. Have you ever noticed how the most influential people in any field aren't the most available? They're not sitting by their phone waiting for calls. They're not responding to every email within minutes. They're not at every meeting, every event, every gathering. Why? Because they understand a fundamental truth: impact requires focus. And focus requires absence from everything that isn't essential. But here's where it gets really interesting. When these people do show up, everyone notices. When they do speak, everyone listens. When they do contribute, it matters. Not because they're playing power games, but because they've understood something vital about human nature, and value creation. Scarcity creates value, but excellence sustains it. Think about this for a moment. Why do we remember certain moments in our lives so vividly? Is it because they happened every day? No. We remember them because they were special, because they were rare, because they stood out from the ordinary. The same principle applies to your presence, your contributions, your very essence. Some of you are nodding right now because you're beginning to understand something profound. You're realizing that all those times you felt compelled to say yes, to be there, to respond immediately, you weren't increasing your value. You were diluting it. You were training the world to expect everything from you and value nothing. But let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't about becoming distant or detached. This isn't about building walls or creating artificial barriers. This is about understanding the power of purposeful presence and meaningful absence. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most valuable thing you can offer is the anticipation of your return. Think about the seasons. Would we appreciate spring as much if it didn't follow winter? Would we value the dawn if night never fell? Would we cherish health if we never experienced its absence? Nature understands the power of cycles of presence and absence, of giving and withdrawing. Yet somehow we've convinced ourselves that we need to be in perpetual spring, constant dawn, endless giving. Here's a truth that might make you uncomfortable. Every time you make yourself too available, you're teaching people how to value you less. Every time you drop everything to respond to non-emergencies, you're teaching people that your time isn't valuable. Every time you say yes when your spirit is screaming no, you're teaching people that your boundaries don't matter. But the real transformation begins when you start teaching people how to value you properly. And yes, this means some people might get uncomfortable. They might complain. They might even try to make you feel guilty. But remember this, people don't resist change, they resist being changed. The moment you start valuing yourself differently, you're asking everyone around you to do the same. Let me tell you something that might sound counterintuitive. The right people will value you more when you're not always available. The right opportunities will multiply when you're selective about what you accept. The right path will become clearer when you're not walking down every road that opens up before you. But this requires courage. It requires the courage to be missed. The courage to let others figure things out without you. The courage to trust that your value isn't in your constant presence, but in the impact you create when you choose to be present. Some of you are feeling a weight lifting from your shoulders right now. You're realizing that you don't have to be everything to everyone. You're understanding that it's okay. No, it's necessary to create space in your life. Space to think. Space to grow. Space to become more valuable. Others of you are feeling resistance. You're thinking about all the obligations, all the expectations, all the people who need you. But ask yourself this: are you truly serving others by being constantly available but perpetually drained? Are you really adding value by being everywhere but not fully present anywhere? The truth is, your greatest contributions will never come from your place of exhaustion. They will come from your place of renewal, your place of strength, your place of purposeful engagement. And finding that place requires the wisdom to step back, the courage to be missed, and the confidence to know that your value isn't diminished by your absence, it's enhanced by it. Consider this: the most powerful force in any economy is scarcity. But the most valuable form of scarcity isn't artificial, it's authentic. It comes from being so focused on delivering excellence in your area of purpose that you naturally become scarce in areas that don't align with that purpose. When you start living this way, something magical happens. Your yeses become more meaningful because they're chosen, not coerced. Your presence becomes more impactful because it's purposeful, not obligatory. Your relationships become more authentic because they're based on mutual value, not mere availability. But here's the part that really excites me when you master this principle. You don't just increase your own value, you elevate everyone around you. You show others that it's possible to be both caring and boundaried, both committed and selective, both valuable and unavailable at times. You become living proof that true value isn't about being everywhere, but about being exactly where you're meant to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. Right now, some of you are sitting there thinking, this all sounds good in theory, but how do I actually do this? How do I start increasing my value without losing everything I've built? That's exactly what we're going to talk about. Because understanding a principle is only the beginning. Implementing it is where true transformation happens. You see, increasing your value isn't about making dramatic changes overnight. It's about making intentional shifts in how you show up in the world. Think about a master perfumer creating a signature scent. They don't just dump in everything they have. They carefully select and combine specific elements to create something unique and valuable. Your presence should be crafted with the same intentionality. Let me share something powerful with you. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Every time you make yourself available, you're making yourself unavailable for something else. The question isn't whether you're saying no, it's whether you're conscious of what you're saying no to. Most people live their lives saying yes by default and no by necessity. But what if you flip that script? What if you started saying no by default and yes by design? What if every yes became a conscious choice rather than an automatic response? This isn't about becoming unavailable. It's about becoming intentionally available. Here's what fascinates me when you start being selective with your presence. People don't just miss you, they start to appreciate the unique value you bring. But this only works if you're actually bringing value when you do show up. This is where many people misunderstand the principle. They think it's just about being less available, but that's only half the equation. The other half is about increasing the quality of your presence. When you do engage, it needs to be full, focused, and transformative. Think about it like this. If you're going to be selective about when you show up, then when you do show up, you need to show up fully. No half presence. No divided attention. No partial engagement. This is where the real work begins. It's not enough to just create scarcity. You must create value within that scarcity. This means developing yourself when you're not visible. It means working on your craft when no one's watching. It means investing in your growth during the seasons of absence. Some of you are getting uncomfortable right now because you're realizing something. You've been using busyness as a substitute for value. You've been using availability as a substitute for impact. You've been using constant presence as a substitute for meaningful contribution. But here's the liberating truth you can stop. You can choose a different way. Start by auditing your current commitments. Look at everything you're saying yes to and ask yourself, is this contributing to my value or diluting it? Is this helping me grow or just keeping me busy? Is this moving me toward my purpose or just filling my time? But be warned, when you start this journey, some people won't understand. They've grown accustomed to your constant availability. They've built their patterns around your endless accessibility. Some might even try to make you feel guilty for choosing to be more selective with your time and energy. Remember, this guilt is often the cost of growth. When you start valuing yourself differently, it forces others to adjust their expectations. Some will resist, some will complain, some might even walk away. But here's the truth that will set you free. The people who truly value you will adapt. They will respect your boundaries. They will appreciate your growth. Think about the last time you really craved someone's presence. What made their presence so valuable? Was it because they were always there? Or was it because when they were there, they were really there? Was it because they were always available? Or was it because their availability felt like a gift rather than a given? This is the kind of presence you want to cultivate, not one that's rare because you're playing games, but one that's precious because it's purposeful. Not one that's scarce because you're being difficult, but one that's valuable because it's intentional. Start with small changes. Begin by delaying your responses to non-urgent matters. Not to play games, but to create space for thoughtful engagement. Start saying, I'll get back to you, instead of giving immediate answers. Not to be evasive, but to ensure your responses are valuable rather than just quick. Pay attention to how this shifts the energy in your interactions. Notice how people start treating your time differently when you treat it differently. Notice how your words carry more weight when they're chosen carefully rather than thrown out casually. Notice how your presence becomes more meaningful when it's intentional rather than automatic. But here's the part that really matters. As you become more selective with your presence, you must also become more impactful with your engagement. This means showing up with purpose. It means bringing your full attention and best energy. It means making your presence count. Think of yourself as a resource, not an infinite one to be endlessly consumed, but a precious one to be wisely invested. Your time, your energy, your presence, these are your assets. And like any valuable asset, they should be invested where they can create the greatest impact. This requires developing a new skill, the ability to distinguish between opportunities that will increase your value and those that will merely keep you busy. It means learning to recognize the difference between activities that feed your purpose and those that just fill your schedule. Some of you are already feeling the shift. You're starting to see your time differently. You're beginning to understand that being less available doesn't mean being less valuable. It often means becoming more valuable. You're realizing that creating space in your life isn't selfish, it's necessary for growth. But here's what excites me most. As you start implementing these principles, you'll notice something extraordinary. The quality of your relationships will improve because they'll be based on value rather than convenience. Your work will have greater impact because it'll come from a place of purpose rather than obligation. Your very presence will carry more weight because it'll be guided by intention rather than habit. We're reaching a crucial moment right now. There's an energy in this room, a shift happening in your spirit. You're starting to see yourself differently, aren't you? You're beginning to understand that your value isn't in your availability, but in your impact. You're realizing that being missed isn't about absence, it's about presence that's so meaningful it creates a void when it's gone. But let me tell you what happens next. Because this is where most people stumble. They get excited about the concept, they understand the principle, but then they go back to their lives and nothing changes. Why? Because understanding isn't enough. You need to be transformed by this truth. Your value isn't something you need to prove, it's something you need to protect. Think about that for a moment. All this time you've been trying to prove your worth by being everywhere, doing everything, answering every call, responding to every message. But what if you've been going about it backward? What if your worth isn't something you need to prove, but something you need to preserve? This is where everything we've discussed comes together. When you protect your presence, you increase its value. When you guard your energy, you amplify its impact. When you become selective with your time, you multiply its worth. But this isn't just about you, it's about the ripple effect you create in the world. When you start honoring your own value, you give others permission to do the same. When you set healthy boundaries, you show others it's possible to be both caring and boundary. When you become selective with your presence, you demonstrate that value isn't about quantity, it's about quality. Some of you are holding back tears right now because you're realizing how much of yourself you've given away. How many times you've said yes when your spirit was screaming no? How many times you've made yourself available when you desperately needed solitude? How many times you've diminished your light to make others comfortable with their darkness? But here's the beautiful truth: you can start again. Right now. In this moment, you can begin to treat yourself like the valuable resource you are. You can start making decisions that honor your worth rather than diminish it. You can begin creating the kind of presence that doesn't need to be constant to be powerful. Think about the legacy you want to leave. Do you want to be remembered as someone who was always there but never truly present? Or do you want to be remembered as someone whose presence was so meaningful that it left an imprint? Someone whose words carried weight because they were chosen carefully. Someone whose time was valued because it was given purposefully. The choice is yours, but the time is now. The world doesn't need more people who are constantly available but perpetually drained. It needs people who are fully present when they show up. It needs people who bring their best energy because they've learned to protect it. It needs people who make an impact because they've learned to focus their presence. Let me share something profound with you. The space between your appearances is just as important as the appearances themselves. Just as music needs rest between notes to create melody, your life needs spaces between engagements to create meaning. These aren't empty spaces, they're opportunities for renewal, for growth, for becoming more valuable. Some of you are fighting this truth right now. You're thinking about all the demands on your time, all the people who expect your constant presence, all the responsibilities that seem to require your continuous attention. But ask yourself this: are you really serving anyone by being everywhere but nowhere fully? Are you really adding value by being available but exhausted? The transformation begins when you start seeing yourself as a valuable resource rather than an infinite one. When you start treating your presence as an investment rather than a commodity. When you begin to understand that your value isn't diminished by your absence, it's enhanced by your intentional presence. This isn't about becoming unavailable, it's about becoming available with purpose. It's not about being distant, it's about being present with intention. It's not about playing games, it's about honoring your worth and the worth of your contributions. But here's what makes this principle so powerful when you start living this way. You don't just increase your own value, you increase the value of everything you touch. Your relationships become deeper because they're built on respect rather than dependence. Your work becomes more impactful because it comes from a place of purpose rather than obligation. Your very presence becomes more meaningful because it's guided by intention rather than habit. You see, letting people miss you isn't about creating artificial scarcity, it's about creating authentic value. It's about showing up in such a meaningful way that your absence is felt. It's about making such an impact when you're present that people look forward to your return. This is your moment of decision. Will you continue to be everything to everyone and nothing to yourself? Or will you have the courage to be missed? Will you keep diminishing your light to make others comfortable? Or will you let it shine so brightly that its absence is noticed? The world is waiting for the authentic you, not the always available version, but the fully present version. Not the perpetually exhausted version, but the purposefully engaged version. Not the version that's everywhere but nowhere fully, but the version that shows up with intention and creates lasting impact. Remember this, your presence is a gift. Your time is a treasure. Your energy is a resource. Start treating them that way and watch how the world responds. Watch how people begin to value your presence more because you've learned to value it first. Watch how your impact grows not because you're doing more, but because you're doing what matters with full intention. You were created to be significant, not just successful. You were designed to make an impact, not just an appearance. You were meant to create value, not just fill space. And that begins the moment you decide to let your presence be guided by purpose rather than pressure, by intention rather than obligation, by value rather than volume. The time has come. The choice is yours. Will you have the courage to be missed? Will you have the wisdom to protect your value? Will you have the strength to show up fully when you do appear? These aren't just questions, they're invitations to a new way of living, a new way of being, a new way of creating value in the world. The world doesn't need another person who's everywhere but nowhere fully. It needs you, the authentic, purposeful, valuable you. The you that shows up with intention. The you that creates impact. The you that's worth missing when you're gone.